So my name is Milan Godin, and currently I work for the regional government in export control. I'm the legal advisor of the unit that deals with the control of items that you can misuse for military purposes and WMD purposes, so nuclear, biological, chemical. And I also take the role of the spokesperson of Belgium in the relevant European meetings and a few of the international control regimes that determine what are the controls that all of the participating governments need to adhere to. I did an internship at the Washington Center in the spring semester of 2011, so January until May, which was, I think it's a nice period to be in Washington because you arrive and it's kind of cold and then the weather gets better and better and the people start going outside more and more. And in the beginning, you know, you're searching your way in the internship. You go to the office, you start looking at how you can contribute to the place where you're interning. And then once you found your place, you have more time to do things outside of the internship, after hours, go to conferences, and that's also the time when the city opens up a bit more because of the nicer weather. So it was a nice dynamic there. I interned at a law firm / consultancy firm that dealt with the protection of whistleblower rights. Very relevant in the current context. In 2011, a bit less well known in the public image. Whistleblowers, you didn't have any large political whistleblowers that were in the news back then. But there were a few high-profile cases in the banking world, in the protection of the environment, that blew the whistle on big companies polluting against regulations and such. So it was a very interesting field where you know, I wasn't involved in that kind of subject before. It was something that was suggested to me by the people of the Washington Center, and it looked very interesting for me to do, and I have to say it was. So the internship helped me in a way that, although I'm not directly involved in the field of whistleblowing as such, there were two aspects. One, you come into an international environment and you learn to adapt with different cultures, which different sensitivities. Also, the Washington Center had well, mainly US students at that time, but also a lot of Chinese, Koreans, Mexicans. Not very many Europeans. We were the only ones there, a bunch of Belgians. And it teaches you to deal with you know, international differences, different sensitivities, different ways of approaching things. And in the office, a bit of the same thing. It's a different working atmosphere than you have in Belgium. On the subject itself, it really taught me how to approach problems that you see. You learn things in university, in college, on how you approach, in my case, law school here in Belgium, on how you approach subjects, but you don't really get taught how to approach them in practice. And when I was at the internship, you suddenly get thrown into the daily life of, on the one hand side, a consultancy firm, but on the other side, a law firm that actually dealt with cases, with people who were imprisoned at the time, who were facing penalties from their companies, who were suing them for blowing the whistle on certain malpractices. So you suddenly end up from still being a college student at the time into working on real cases with real people. So in that sense, it was a real eye-opener, which helped me gain abilities and skills that I still use every day. And the internship itself also helped with a few initiatives, such as public speaking, which is a very useful skill, certainly in a different language than your native language. It also taught me to approach my own goals and ideas for the future in a different way. This is one of the cultural differences, I would say, broadly speaking, between the US and Europe. Where here you go to university, and of course the entrance fees are a lot lower, so you have a lot less personal investment in a way. So you're focused on getting your degree, yes, but it's a lot more relaxed. And in the US, they really approach it, okay, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve with this degree, with your investment of money, your investment of time? And it taught me to think in a more goal-oriented way as well, in that way. And I took that back when I arrived back to Belgium. I graduated, and I knew I wanted to go more into the European regulatory sector, so I decided to do an extra master after master, an LLM in European law, and to search a field where I would chase my interests, which are international law, European law, and also actually international policy, which was also an aspect that I really got familiar with during the internship. Before that, I was purely focused on law. With the internship, the consultancy firm, you also learn how to outreach to the government, how to influence policy. So now I'm on the other side. I determine the policy from the government side. But the way of working and the way of thinking are pretty much the same. You might have different interests from consultancy groups, interest groups, but the way you approach problems and try to find solutions are very much the same. When it comes to specific experiences, it's just that Washington, D.C. is such an amazing city in a way. It's a small city for a U.S. city. It's only 550,000 people in the district itself. But there are so many people there with interesting histories and interesting functions and interesting career paths. So even at random on the street, I ran into a guy who was walking his dog, and he said something to his dog, and I looked up because I thought he was talking to me. And we got talking, and he turned out to be an ex-advisor to the Ministry of Defense, who had now a consultancy firm, and I was already interested. I work now in the same sector, which is basically control of trade in defense items and related items. But he invited me to his office to just look around and experience the field he was working in and how big consultancy offices in DC work. And he wasn't obliged to do that at all. I just met him on the street and got talking, and then he noticed that I was an intern, that I was interested in his field, and this led to an invitation, basically, as if you would go on a job interview, but then without it actually being a job interview, still good training in a sense, but just an interesting experience. And you meet many people like that. There were times where I ended up in a Nicaraguan restaurant with a native Indian discussing how to pronounce Lakota language. Crazy things like that happen in DC. You meet people that advocate for the environment, advocate for the rights of Native people, Native Americans, that are politically engaged, socially engaged. So it's just the amount of people with such interesting stories that you meet in Washington. That was for me the highlight of being there. So for anyone that is interested in doing the internship, any of my compatriots from Belgium, I would say try to do it, try to find it. There are Fulbright scholarships available, which are very useful because it's an expensive experience to Belgian norms, but it's worth the investment. And I know that the Belgian universities are very flexible in building in this internship package of the Washington Center into your curriculum at home. For example, for me it replaced a whole half year of studies, the equivalent of following actual classes in my home university. And it's an invaluable experience. It's an invaluable experience of experiencing living in America, experiencing US culture, but also exploring other ideas of gaining skills and attending lectures, working in a completely culturally similar yet somehow different environment. if there's one small advice, just to not have too much of a culture shock, make sure you're over 21 when you go. But apart from that, I can only encourage everyone to try to find a way of attending, because it's been such an invaluable experience for me that really formed who I am personally as well as professionally. So the role that Fulbright played was obviously a financial role. Like I said, the entrance fees for these kind of programs are, at the US standards, actually very low. But to Belgian students who are used to a very small entrance fee for university and the bigger picture of things, it's just an invaluable contribution to allowing you to take up such an opportunity. I don't think that without the Fulbright scholarship I would have been able to attend the internship. It was a sizable amount for a student to pay, and the contribution from the Fulbright scholarship allowed me to take up this opportunity, and that's something I'm really grateful for.